What is simple today might not be simple tomorrow. Welcome back to Simplification Stories, episode 3. Hi Ollie, episode 3, we're back again.
Simon, wonderful to be joining you once again. As always, it's a true pleasure. Thank you.
Good. So today we're going to start the conversation around talking about things that might feel simple today but might cause complexity tomorrow, and we're talking in terms of time spans of tomorrow being 6 months, 12 months, 18 months away. And I think a really good example to kick off with is the whole click and collect growth that certainly retailers have experienced. So if we cast our minds back maybe 10 years, there was this phenomenon of click and collect where we'd all shop in the future by using our phones or laptops. We'd then be walking past the store, we'd nip in and collect the parcel and go home. And actually, it probably wasn't that far away, that premonition, do you think?
No, I mean, that's, you describing it, we're all using our phones to shop and so on. Feels about right, yeah.
But the thing we didn't know was the growth.
Absolutely. And I think there's a couple of elements of growth here, Simon, right? There's the natural e-commerce growth that we've seen over years now. It's been quite a steady path, right? Increasing market share or, percent of overall retail market share year on year, quite steadily. But then, of course, we've also had the insane growth that has been driven over the past 15 months or so from the pandemic, of course.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's really interesting, as we've talked about on numerous podcasts, we spend a lot of time in retail stores. And if I cast my mind back, certainly 7 to 10 years ago, the whole click and collect piece was maybe a cupboard behind the checkout. Maybe not even a cupboard, maybe just some boxes, maybe a bit of space in the warehouse. And that's changed massively. And I think, yes, there's the growth so that we all tend to shop that way. There's a two-way journey now of actually I may take my parcel that I've ordered back for click and collect and drop it off somewhere. So my local petrol station, my local Waitrose, wherever it might be that does the reverse logistics of that journey. So all of a sudden I've got stuff coming in and coming out. Plus, if you think of B&Q, for example, they sell things from screws and nails through to garden sheds. So to cater for that growth and then a massively diversified product range from put it in a bag to actually I need a forklift truck to get it out to your car has always been a huge challenge, but I think has been intensified by the growth. Then we talk about COVID, but also back to the point of this conversation, the way it was set up in the start point, and I'm not talking B&Q now, I'm talking generically, the way it was set up in the start point of a cupboard or some boxes or some retrieval portals behind the checkout. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sure does. And to be honest, I laughed because I'd forgotten about the click and collect cupboards when they first started, before it came a full on stockroom and so on. So it's funny how things evolve and change. And if we all cast our minds back to those early days of click and collect, this was this sort of futuristic thing. What's the demand? It's not a huge amount, but it catapults over time. And I think we'll continue to see that as the shifts in the retail marketplace continue. I can imagine fast forward to 10 years and we'll be talking about, do you remember how grocery online orders were picked with trolleys in stores and put in vans by people and all that sort of stuff? It's, will seem very quaint, right?
Yeah, and we'll then 10 years on be saying, do you remember when they were picked by robots and it used to fly into our houses and drop it off? It evolves, doesn't it? And I think it's a really interesting point around there's a risk that you plan too far in advance and that vision of the future never comes off. So I always think the M6 is a great example, isn't it? They built the M6 and they added an extra lane because they thought in 10 years' time there's going to be more traffic. Actually, if they'd built an extra 3 lanes, at the time it would have been expensive, but not probably half or a third as expensive it has been to expand it now because of the volume. So it wasn't palatable then because the growth wasn't expected, and you can't over-engineer everything just in case because the cost becomes unpalatable. So there's this real risk of over engineering or over safeguarding and complexity, isn't there? Because actually, all of a sudden, if we had 5 lanes of the M6 in the 1960s, they'd have to maintain 5 lanes and manage the road surfaces and all that kind of extra upkeep that goes around it. So the complexity would have been a lot bigger for the chance that there'd be more traffic on the road, which may have never come to fruition.
Yes, and of course there'd be all the I'm sure in that example of the motorway, public outcry of, we don't need that many lanes, there's never going to be any cars. Whereas actually, fast forward and it does happen. And I could definitely see that happening in a store. If you put in a huge click and collect stock room with racks and racks and racks of storage space for, A, B, C, etc., everyone would have said, this is a complete waste of space. This is profitable selling space that we should be using for putting more shelving, more mods, more racks, more rails, whatever, out. Get product out on sale. It's not going to sell in a storeroom, right? It's interesting. I think always going to be a debate around, whether it's click and collect, motorways, or anything else. It's going to be a debate about how much spare capacity do you build in to the operation and the operating model, just in case, or what if? It's an interesting challenge. Where have you seen that argument being taken in a sensible direction?
I think that lots of retailers, and again, they're circling back around it now, are looking at the future of their store portfolio. Lots of people working on store of the future or layout of the future, design of the future, however you want to kind of badge it up. And I think that's where the real learning happens, if you're prepared to push the boundaries. And I know we've talked before about kind of failing quickly and learning fast, and that more agile way of working, which seems to be prevalent in IT and tech development, and now in projects within retail, hospitality, and customer facing environments. So for me, there's a sweet spot, but finding that sweet spot is really difficult, because you could argue, if we take the supermarket example, home delivery of your shopping has taken off, clearly, again, probably magnified by the whole pandemic. But in a future world, would you now be building dark stores? So we've talked about and heard about those before. But from a cost point of view, an efficiency of pick point of view, a disruption to a non-disruption to customer point of view, will they going to go back that way or not, because they're a lot pulled away? Or actually, do you turn your live customer supermarket into a dark store overnight? So actually, I think some of it is around your perception and the angle you come from, because the capacity might already be there in the environment you've got. It's just a different way of thinking about it. Certainly the point you made before around people giving over space in retail, there's lots of overspacing. So now's the time to maybe turn that space into more click and collect storage space, retrieval space, to rethink that whole process. How do you make it slick for the customer to come in and collect or drop off, but also how do you make it slick for the colleagues to find the parcel, the whole retrieval system, and then the backhaul or the drop off from whoever's delivering it to the store. So that, I think people are thinking about those journeys. I think the space in certainly the larger units on retail parks is probably already there. There's some re-engineering to do. But actually, if you're coming at it from a different angle, those stores stand there, I think, 50% of the time in most retail park environments, those stores will be closed, lights off. Is that the opportunity to turn them on and do something differently? I don't know. That's an opportunity I see.
But it's interesting. It's making me think, to be honest, about the current surge in Q-commerce or quick commerce. And I'm thinking about the likes of some of these super fast grocery deliveries, 10 minutes deliveries. It's crazy. But what they have done, they've done it by simplifying the business, right? They have said, how can we do this in 10 minutes? Well, we're going to need a reduced range, which for the likes of a Tesco or Sainsbury's, historically, to have said, we're going to offer a very small range for an online delivery service, would have been laughed out of the shop, right? Yep. Because that would have been one of the non-negotiables. No, the range is, are thousands of SKUs, and we're not gonna limit it to, a few hundred only. out of the question, no. But actually, as disruptive elements, startups, for example, come in and they test some of those assumptions, perhaps that have never been tested before, suddenly you start to open up new opportunities, frankly.
That whole, I mean, in fairness, I've never had the direct need to order something that I need in 10 minutes. So I assume there's a market for it. It's not necessarily the market for me, although I can see maybe a tradesperson sat outside a Travis Perkins or a Wickes ordering on their phone, Screwfix, just wanting to walk in and collect it. So I can see there's an element of, can I jump the queue potentially, or actually can I get somebody to do the picking work for me and I just walk in and get the trolley. So yeah, I agree. And certainly that whole Deliveroo Just Eat piece, where it's driven it from the hospitality sector in lockdown's been driven through that, but then it's merged across, Holland and Barrett are doing it, where you can get your vitamins done. It's blended into more mainstream retail, really pushes the boundaries, but it's still limited by when the stores are open, isn't it? So I can only get my delivery of vitamins within the trading hours, because otherwise there's no access to pick the stock and then somebody collect it. So it's still constrained.
It is, and I guess it's an interesting operating model discussion that needs to be had for any given change or new proposition that says, what are the boundaries here? What's negotiable? What's not negotiable? Where are we going to draw the line? Which assumptions are we going to test or not test? And how are we going to test it, by the way, as well? And ultimately, I think for me, as I look back over the pandemic, one of the key lessons has been that we've got to take some chances, because when you try something out, you learn huge amounts, right? There have been plenty of stories of, mulling over different project ideas for years, and then actually it's been done in days. The world hasn't crumbled, the world hasn't exploded, or whatever bad omen was mooted around the board table, so to speak. And I think there's that huge opportunity to get on, to do something, and to learn, and then you'll find out about all of these different assumptions and decisions and what ifs, and what you should do, and that can then, of course, from a store of the future or whatever form, actually, here's the new operating model that we're going to deploy nationwide or to a certain section of the estate.
And we talked about future proofing. So, if the guys who built the M6 had known what traffic could be like in 2020, they'd have built more lanes. If most retailers had known what click and collect parcels would be coming in and going out, they'd have probably spent more time, effort and money with racking storage, maybe reconfiguring checkouts. So that's fine. And, post-rationalisation is a great thing. And we can all say, we told you so. But nobody can really predict the future. The last 12 months has really told us that, hasn't it? Dichotomy then, as a retailer that I've got lots of shops. I probably know that shopping habits have changed in terms of physical people coming into my stores and browsing and buying. So I've probably got some options, haven't I? I can turn the model and incentivize people to come in. So actually offers, tokens, discounts, but for a physical purchase in the store. I can maybe accept the fact that that's just the way the world and my e-commerce business is going to grow. So I can sell more things because they're online. I can hold the stock maybe centrally or push it down to be fulfilled from store. What challenges does that have then to my layout, the space I give over to all those collection points or retrieval points or refund points? Or do something completely different that tries to disrupt the market, which is probably a really, really risky strategy for your whole estate, maybe not for one or two stores. So how do you think about future proofing? What kind of things do you take into consideration, or do you think people should, when they're faced with that landscape of, we probably know the direction it's going to go, but that might not be the direction that they want it to go?
For me, it's about a couple of things. Firstly, about doing some scenario planning. So actually, what are the potential futures? We don't know exactly what's going to happen. Perhaps we have a feeling that the future might evolve like this. Paint that picture. Envisage what it looks like for 1, 2, 5, maybe even 10 years, right? it might equally not happen, and that future could diverge at any point, starting from tomorrow through to 10 years time, right? What are those alternatives, and how could they come true? And actually, I did a conversation with Dr. Jackie Mulligan where we were talking about scenario planning, and one of the key points that Jackie made was actually we've got to get into the uncomfortable scenarios, because there's a huge likelihood of uncomfortable things. And by that, Simon, I mean we don't want to think about what if we were to have another pandemic, or what if we were to go to different extremes. There's a huge number of different extremes we could go to that may or may not be relevant for any given project change, proposition, etc. But you've got to explore those uncomfortable scenarios and really genuinely explore them and say, well, this could happen. What would you do then? So the first part is scenario planning. And then the second part, for each of those scenarios, how do you identify and assess the risks involved? What could go wrong? Equally, what could go right? What could you do that could actually multiply that particular opportunity even further? And I think those two combined will give you the opportunity to play around in the future, but then say, what should we do about it? And build that then into the operating model that allows more robustness, allows more flexibility, perhaps, and ultimately we'll come up with a better solution overall for whatever the future holds. And we don't entirely know what that is to the point.
Yeah, and I wrote down, actually, as you were talking, then I wrote down 4 words: agile, pivoting, flexibility, and then trial. So I think you've covered flexibility really well. Pivoting is one of those terms or words that was used a lot during lockdown. So people's businesses pivoting direction. So they've proved that they can do it without the bureaucracy in a world where it's critical to keep the doors open, the lights on, even, or money coming through the physical till or the virtual till. Agile we've touched on, and that comes back a bit to pivoting. So doing things quickly, being prepared to fail, being brave, but again, not within the business looking for scapegoats to why it's failed, but understanding from a process point of view, a customer point of view, a colleague point of view, why that didn't quite work. It's not about whose fault was this. It's a good thing you've learned quickly it didn't work or pan out how you expected it to, and these are the learnings from it. These are the things we're going to do differently. And trial was based around, and again, I think there's quite a few of the bigger retailers doing this now, taking 1 or 2 stores, not in your prime locations, but maybe in somewhere slightly out of the way, and those being the ones that you can play with. So having good teams that understand some of the stuff you might throw over them is going to be tricky, it's going to be painful, but they're the ambassadors for working through the processes that you throw at them, or the new ways of working, or the new bits of tech that say, yeah, I get this. It would be really good at peak because it means we can expand our checkout capacity by 100% because we've got all these new mobile till trolleys. But actually, it's really difficult off peak because where do we put them? How do we keep them charged? How do we get software updates? It's all that stuff that you can, again, I think, learn very quickly from really good teams and from customers in those stores without inflicting that pain on the rest of the estate. So we both work in projects, don't we, Ollie? But, there'll always be maybe a pilot, a trial store for that individual project. But I'm talking more about those are the stores you use as test beds for the compound effect of lots of things, or some really wacky ideas of, I don't know, we'll take all the tills out in this store and we'll make it all self-service.
Yep.
Go figure.
Yeah. I think there's a huge opportunity there, to the point we were talking about in terms of, learn and see what happens, right? Can I add a word to your list? A great list, by the way, Simon. Let's just refresh that list. So you had agile, flexibility, pivot, and trial.
Yep.
Can I add momentum onto that list, which was something, of course, we spoke about with Steve Leach in the last episode.
Yep.
I think it's a really important piece because actually when you've got that momentum, that change momentum, then suddenly everything comes a lot more forgiving, which to all of those points that you've just raised, it just helps grease the wheels, right? Everything gets smoother. And there's a lot more energy and support both from your colleagues and as well as the customers and even the market as a whole. Energy to support what you are doing and the mission that you continue to be on. So I'd add that list into the words as well.
Yeah, and momentum's it's a really good one, isn't it? Don't get clogged down in the small stuff. Keep focus on the big stuff. And I'm sure in your corporate days, like me, you've been involved in those big organisations in projects where you kind of know deep down it's probably the right type of thing to be doing, but the way it's being done or the software that's being used or the setup of the project just kind of isn't going to work. And depending on the culture of those businesses, you put your head above the parapet and say, guys, girls, this is some stuff that's really concerning me and this is the reason why, and you get shot at. Or actually people say, I get that, how can we do it differently? And it's for me shortcutting some of that with the momentum of, yeah, we get it, move on, or let's change the direction without getting bogged down in the, well, who signed it off, who brought in this supplier, because that's the stuff that detracts, right? Because that negative energy isn't going to get you anywhere. Nobody I've ever worked with has selected a supplier or started a project or had an idea that they knew wasn't going to work or was a negative selection. No, we don't. It's not human nature, is it? Why would we set ourselves up to fail?
It's such a good point. I would absolutely stress that, everyone at whatever time, whatever ridiculous mistake has been made in the past, that wasn't meant to be a mistake, right? That was a good intentioned decision that was made based on the data that was around at the time. And sure, of course, we can get better at decision making. Of course, we can get better at, perhaps consulting more people around the business or taking into consideration more insight from the wider market. But it was done at that moment in time for the right reasons. And the right people would have been involved as well, by the way, at that time. So, yeah, we love to use hindsight to perhaps throw rocks, but I think we need to move past that and look forward, right? Look positively. It's more about what we can do rather than what has happened already.
Yeah, absolutely. And a story on a similar theme but different subject. So the kids football team that I coach, and I've coached them since they were under 8s and we're about to go into our season at under 16s.
Wow.
It's interesting because when you see the kids grow and you form a really good bond with them and they're a great bunch of boys. But from taking yourself out of business and then kind of relating it to sport, it's really interesting because, the midfielder or the striker will all miss a shot and it won't be a goal, but they didn't intentionally mean to do that. And if you can start to kind of educate the boys into that way of, well, he's not took that shot to deliberately miss. But then if you then think of the goalkeeper, if they don't save it, the ball's in the back of the net and it's a goal. So the consequences of the unintentional mistake are very different. Striker has a shot, doesn't score, or you carry on playing and have another shot. Goalkeeper tries to make the save and doesn't, and all of a sudden you're 1-0 down, 2-0 down. So neither of them meant to make the mistake. They've both gone on the field with the best intentions to do the best they can, but the results are very different. One's an, oh, well, you might score the next one. The other one's a goalkeeper with his head looking at the floor who's just letting maybe something he should have saved. So you then take that back to business world, and intentionally we don't end up wanting to concede a goal. We all want to score a goal, but sometimes it happens. For me, that's when the education, the culture piece of how the team support. So actually, is it really going to help that goalkeeper? His teammates shouting him he should have done better, or shouting at that midfield striker that he should have scored? Probably not. If they're saying, don't worry, you'll get the next one or you'll save the next shot, that's the bit where you start to focus on the positives and you get that collective power rather than you just let a silly goal in, or you should have finished that one. And you could take that back into the business world and relate to it. It's exactly the same.
Yeah, and of course, sticking in the world of sport and transitioning into business in a second, the top quality strikers will know that you have to keep trying, right? You will have those off days. I think there's a Michael Jordan quote of saying how many match-winning shots he's missed, but if he didn't take the shots, he wouldn't have won the match-winning shots that he did win. I think, how many times in sport or in business have we seen the critics shout down a mistake that have then meant someone has not taken the shot next time round because they've been too nervous of missing it once again? I think that can be crippling for an individual, a team, or a company, right? If we've got the wrong culture in place, it is shouting down mistakes, because everyone is going to be scared to potentially take a risk and take, a leap of faith that might get them in trouble.
Yeah, and I think if we bring it back round to the start of the conversation, that whole how do you future-proof what's maybe simple today isn't simple tomorrow because of growth or changes in buying habits or changes in business. Working in the future, and again, like you, lots of people working in innovation teams now or stores of the future, as we've talked about, that's all risk because you're trying to predict what's going to happen. If we were all good at predicting what happened, we'd be predicting lottery numbers, not how people are going to shop in the future, because it's probably far more lucrative. So they're working in a world of risk, which in some companies is probably a great place to be. In others, probably a bit more nervous and a bit more tenuous place to be. But I think we should just remember that whole trying to think about the future is predicting the unknown. Some stuff will be right, some stuff will be wrong, some stuff will be somewhere in the middle. But it's at times a really uneasy place to be because you're probably going to get more stuff wrong than you are right.
And that then leads to say, actually, let's put a continuous improvement program in place, which of course is something that we spoke about in our first conversation a couple of episodes back now, which actually is a huge opportunity for many companies. And as we take on this sort of pro-trial, highly flexible, very agile mindset of change and of sort of business development, we have to think, how do we continue to evolve this? How do we continually improve this? How do we challenge ourselves and almost, we say we're willing to change what we've done, the good work that has been done. We're willing to change that because actually now we know more, or the world has changed, and it doesn't fit anymore, right? We have to have that openness, that honesty to go in and have that challenge.
Yeah, and I think again we talked about it in episode 1. There's that continuous improvement piece is evolution, which I'm a big fan of. Mm-hmm. Revolution, also known as transformation, for me, 9.9 times out of 10 becomes evolution, because transformational change in a customer-facing environment, retail, hospitality, is so difficult to do. True transformational change, not some tweaks around the edge, but doing something transformationally different tomorrow than you did today. There's not many people that land that type of change. It just becomes evolutionary change.
Definitely.
So let's pause there, because I think that's a really good conversation, but also a good point to pause before we introduce Lisa Widdowson in episode 4 from Holland and Barrett, who's going to take us through some of their continuous improvement changes. And they've got, I won't give it all away, but we both know they've got a really interesting way of how they develop tech and implement new tech. So hopefully Lisa will take us through that journey and some other interesting insights.
Definitely. Well, I can't wait. I'm loving our conversations here, Simon. You always bring lots of different perspectives, and right on the money, so to speak. So wonderful catching up, and looking forward to the next episode.
Excellent. Speak in episode 4.
Bye, Simon.